Welcome to In the Know with Neo, and thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Joshua Moore, and for those who aren't aware, Neo is a student-led social justice initiative that amplifies the voices of underrepresented small business owners within the Cincinnati community, and we're excited to share this week's episode with you. So greetings to those tuning into In the Know with Neo. I'm your host, Joshua Moore, and this week I have the grace of speaking with Daniel Posmik. Daniel is the founder and past president of Neo Initiative, which he established in June of 2020 of his sophomore year at the University of Cincinnati. Daniel, so you graduated in May of 2020, and in your time here, we had the chance to connect and build a relationship throughout the years. So I'm beyond excited to have this opportunity to conversate in person, because each time I walk away from our conversations, I feel inspired both personally and professionally, enlightened with new information and perspectives, and just simply ready to take on the world. So how are you on this fine Wednesday, and how excited are you to be back in Cincinnati?
Thank you. First of all, I'm really, really excited to be back. Thank you for this wonderful intro. No, I'm really, really excited to be back here. I have not been in this building in Lindner ever since I graduated. And
we're kind of taking over the lobby, so.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a beautiful day to do this. I'm incredibly excited for this. I've been working, my full-time job ever since graduating, so this is a really cool opportunity for me to talk about Neo again and get back into that, feel a little bit nostalgic.
Yes, back on campus. So as you know, we started In the Know with Neo as a new initiative, as we've been in like the rebranding stages as Neo as an organization, and what better person to have on the podcast than the one who laid the foundation for all things Neo has accomplished throughout the years for minority businesses, communities both inside and outside Cincinnati, and just UC students overall. So the first question I just have is, who is Daniel Posmik? Like your elevator pitch for those who don't know, and afterwards maybe just give a brief overview of like the original what and why of Neo.
Love that. I don't think I've given an elevator pitch in so long.
A buzzword.
But yes, no, I love it. My name is Daniel Posmik. I am 23 years old. I'm originally from Munich, Germany. And I majored in economics and data analytics while I was here at UC, graduated in May, and then got a job at an energy economics consultancy. And now in January, I'm moving to Chicago to start a research fellowship at the University of Chicago.
New news. So I've loved to hear it. And you've really been an inspiration to me, just both in school and for like personal initiatives from the conversations we had in Neo's, just like a great tangible idea of all that you believe in. So like what were the beginning where'd the beginning idea of Neo come from? Very brief, and then we'll get more into like the more intricate details, but like the brief what and why of Neo Initiative as like an organization.
I started Neo that is a great question. I started Neo right when COVID was happening, roughly. And for me, I was at a point where I was just really overwhelmed with everything that was going on in the world, personally, but then also because for the first time, I started realizing that everything, not being from the United States, I had realized that everything that I had perceived around me was somewhat in a bubble, and COVID tore that bubble down for the first time. So I realized what was really going on in the broader community around me. Me coming into this country, being a white man, just existing in a system that was designed for folks like me. COVID for the first time showed me that it's not this rosy in real life. And so what I wanted to do with Neo, it was an attempt to put together my passions into one idea. And so
I love that.
I've enjoyed data analytics in school, and I was like, okay, this is cool in the classroom, but I've been hearing is like these big tech companies, all these huge companies, they're all looking for data scientists, data analysts. Like, why is this so popular? There's got to be a lot of value behind that. And so I thought, well, there has to be value for that in broader society, not just within those tech giants. And so that's how that idea came up for the first time of like, okay, like what is it about small businesses? Like, can they leverage data analytics? It's always a talk about these huge companies, but when we talk about small businesses, are they able to leverage data analytics? And most importantly, is it the minority-owned small businesses that can leverage that those tools? And that how Neo really first came into an idea. And from there on, I was very lucky and privileged to have conversations with community leaders, with professors who gave a lot of valuable input. And ever since, that's when it started. Yeah.
I think that was one of the biggest pieces for me, working at We Prosper, which is a Black-owned investment firm, after my sophomore year, and getting involved with Neo already afterwards. It just really opened my eyes to those gaps that you mentioned. Like, do minority businesses have access to data analytics, and are they able to understand how to utilize them and like create success as their counterparts are in business overall? So like, what was the key moment when you realized Neo's work was simply just larger than like business success?
Ooh, that's a great question. I feel like there was not one moment. This moment, well, I guess in a way that moment was an amalgamation of a bunch of different interactions that I had. I was, like I had just mentioned, very lucky to be invited into vulnerable spaces. Black business owners sharing vulnerable stories, Black community leaders sharing vulnerable stories with me, being vulnerable with me, inviting me into their spaces. And that's when I realized that what I can do is just it's not that I am. What I can do is really just utilize the privilege that I have and a passion that I have for data analytics and apply it to the community in a way that is larger than business, you know? And I think it's those small moments that really defined how I think about Neo, and when I first realized, like, whoa, like this can really develop into something.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the biggest pieces for me, just in understanding where I wanted to put my time and efforts, is once I had that realization that what I do with my time and the things that I've learned throughout like my career in life is bigger than just like a monetary metric or like a performance metric, but do actually have a passion for that. I think like through the conversations we had, I was able to like see your display of your passions through like a means such as Neo, and realizing like you can use the gifts which you have to help and benefit others while also like fulfilling yourself.
Yeah, there's one thing that I'd like to add on to that because it's a perfect segue. In a way, I just saw it of myself. There is a small thing that I can do. I already have the passion for data analytics. I can do just a little bit more and then enable that way. Like, you know, I am not responsible for the success of the entrepreneurs that we work with, but I can do the small additional step to enable, to give them access to that. I am providing a simple service that can go a long way in the hands of these bright individuals that I've had the privilege of working with.
Yeah, I love it. I love having conversations with you. But so the next one is like a large part of your story involves your experience as an international student. So coming to the University of Cincinnati, I'm interested, what was the journey as an international student like for you? And like second off, like a double-ended question, how has this city impacted you as a human being and then as a professional as well?
My experience as an international student was absolutely critical to me realizing that Neo was an idea that I wanted to pursue. When I first came to the United States as a freshman, I remember I initially got admitted to Liner, but I couldn't afford it, and so I ended up at the University of Cincinnati Blue Ash, which, for those of you who don't know, is a 2-year school within the University of Cincinnati system, so a community college, I think you could call it that. And I, as a freshman, as a first year in college, was in a very dire financial situation, and on the one hand, I felt really frustrated because I was like, there's all these things I want to do. And one, I see all my friends being able to do those things on the main campus, on the uptown campus, having the resources to do them, but I can't. But then on the other hand, it was eye-opening as well because I was like, okay, like I'm here in this situation, and I wouldn't say that I had it necessarily easy, but there were folks who were studying with me who, I mean, hats off to them because the stuff that they had to overcome to be in that position, that was really the eye-opening part of one, realizing that yes, inequities exist. Inequities exist in higher education, and then most importantly, inequities exist beyond that. It isn't just about me, because it is so easy when you're facing an obstacle, or if you're facing a structural inequity, for example, to just focus on that. And one of the most valuable experiences for me was to realize that, like, hey, like, yeah, you have to go through all of that, but at the end of the day, you still are so privileged by the fact that you're being able to sit here and you have all of these resources given to you. And being able to talk to folks who don't fit that standard mold of, like, oh, a college student coming from a mid to high class background, being able to have conversations with those folks was eye-opening to that. And that was really just like thinking about, okay, this is about more than me.
Yeah, I love that the point you made too is just knowing the struggles that you faced, but also recognizing those around you were facing similar, if not more severe issues, and using that to just kind of shape your perspective in the way that you looked at it. So coming to Cincinnati, I love Cincinnati. Being from Columbus, I always tell people it's better. It's better than Columbus, which I told that to Means as well, and he said that was very relevant. So how has Cincinnati impacted you?
I love talking about Cincinnati. Yeah. I honestly didn't know what Cincinnati was until I moved out of it. And first of all, every time I get the question, I'm like, I'm from Munich, Germany, well-known city. Like, why are you here? Like, why are you in Cincinnati, Ohio? And I was like, I mean, I'm just life. I ended here because of life. But and I didn't realize how great of a city Cincinnati was until I moved out of it again. And I've been living in Boston for the last half year, which is also a great city. But for me, Cincinnati is community. Cincinnati, more than any other city that I've ever lived in my admittedly short life, has given me such a strong, diverse, and vibrant community in every aspect, whether that is the entrepreneurship ecosystem around here, whether that is the academic community, or just my community of friends, of fellow outdoors people who are passionate about, the outdoors and climbing and hiking and all of that. Cincinnati is just, in a way, it's authentic, and that gives me so much energy in a way to do things and to just want to do things. Yeah.
I love how you answered the question, just like so many different buckets and like places in Cincinnati where you can grow. Just like the business, the leisure, the friends, the professional. There's just so many places where you can put your effort into. And moving into the next question, with Neo being targeted to like social impact and minority businesses, what do you believe, since you've done like a lot of research and just taking the time to understand Neo's impact, what do you believe are like the main factors contributing to like the gaps in society and wealth that have caused minority businesses to lack the education, the ability, and like the accessibility to like the necessary tools to succeed in business?
Yeah, I don't think I'm qualified to necessarily give a broad overview about the factors that influence this gap, but in a way, like, the parallel that I saw with my own background is the fact that education is inaccessible in this country. A lot of times it is talked about higher education, rising tuition rates, increasing inaccessibility for low to middle income communities. There is a correlation with minority-owned small businesses and not having access to certain tools, because those tools are taught at those tools are hidden behind barriers, so to say, which cannot be overcome by folks in certain situations. Like, just that parallel, because being in a 2-year institution and getting to learn from the narratives of folks like that was incredible. And that is really the biggest point, is just education. And the accessibility of education in this country. That is really the main point that I have focused on during my time at NEO, and then also during my own research. And admittedly, I haven't really gotten to dive into many other factors, and I also don't think I'm qualified to talk about those. But education, and I mean, it starts far beyond university and post-secondary education. It starts with how schools are funded in this country. it's a systemic issue, and education should be a great equalizer.
Mm-hmm.
Yet in this country, it is the opposite of that. And Neo in an attempt to just move the needle in the opposite direction by just a little bit. And even if we can just impact 1, 2, 3, or 4 small business owners, then that is better than doing nothing.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it was brought me back to the conversation we had with Means, speaking over the same topic of social impact. He knows and understands he's not going to change the world all at one time. But if you can take those steps, and I mentioned like brick by brick, have a conversation with one person, increasing their knowledge and understanding, and they can go do that for other people. But yeah, just in my time with Neo as an analyst, I'm in a project lead. It's so great to see the appreciation that the business owners have for the work and like the knowledge that you provide to them. And it seems so small, but at the end of the day, and like in a large perspective, it can take their business to a whole nother level.
That is a goal. That is the end goal. Yeah. Depending on how far you get with that. Yeah, it is. But even in just certain situations of just sometimes, even if, let's say, hypothetically, a project doesn't work out, maybe connecting that entrepreneur with another entrepreneur who's in the same cohort, like these type of things, it's these small things. And even if there's just one thing that can be done, like, then that's better than nothing.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
And I think that hits perfectly on, like, we've been speaking over, like, what is Neo? And the first thing that comes to mind just when I think about it is community. And it's just like, it's not only business analytics, it's not only consulting, it's just how can we help you overall in your business and in your life. And I think that just encompasses it the best. So like going more into like the business analytics niche focus, what was your reasoning for creating like a niche focus for the organization through data analytics consulting?
Yeah, that is a great question. In a way, it was subjective because I'm passionate about data. I love data. I love numbers.
Data head.
Yeah, I am. Like, I like statistics, all of that stuff. And so I thought the best way I can contribute is by leveraging that. Like straight up. Like that is the best way I believe I can use my brain. Then on the other hand, then it was like, okay, well, that's only one part. Like, even if I do this stuff and it's not going to end up, like, if it's not useful, then it's not useful. Why do it? But then I did realize with having conversations with folks, with community leaders, with professors, that small businesses actually are looking for that, and that it could help small businesses. And then in a way, the process of figuring out, like, okay, like, for example, one thing that I'm personally really interested in is machine learning. Do small businesses need machine learning algorithms? Probably not. And so that was like also like trying to make sure that you hit the middle of that. Like, the reason Neo exists is to be relevant. Like, we're not just here to pat ourselves on the back. It's like, oh, look how cool we are. Like, we are doing the super cool stuff. No. We want to be helpful. And so it is a very, I would say, precarious balance between the two of like, what do you want to do versus what is needed. And that kind of like limbo between those two is how Neo's niche was kind of found. Actually, a prime example for that is in my last semester while I was president at Neo, I was pushing really hard for an area in Neo called systems analytics. So what that means is analytics focusing around sales systems, point of sale systems, website analytics, implementing systems that save time for the small business owners. Because after getting to talk to a lot of small business owners, one of the biggest issues was I don't have enough time. We worked with a lot of Black women at Neo during my tenure at Neo, and a lot of them had full-time jobs, a family, and that small business. That blew my mind. Like,
how
do you juggle all of that? Like, I still have incredible respect for that. And then I was like, okay, but like, it would be kind of like almost like, can you imagine walking in there was like, oh, we're going to implement some overly complex machine learning algorithm that helps nobody. Then drop it. Yeah, like that helps nobody. You're wasting people's time. You got to listen to what folks really, really need. And in a lot of cases, it was, we want to save time. We want to make sure that when a customer checks out in our online store, that everything that can be automated is automated. So I was pushing that really hard during the end of my tenure at Neo. And this is a good example of how we found our niche within the organization.
Yeah, and I think that walking into Neo and like the desire I had to learn more about how business analytics is applied and how I can use that within my professional career and even in personal life, it helps you understand. I heard something in this past summer at my internship. It was very analytical heavy, but you can be creative with analytics. And I think
Exactly.
analytics people can be standoffish to
Oh
analytics
yeah,
because of like machine learning and artificial intelligence. It
yeah,
seems scary,
it is.
but
Yeah,
once you can like just look at it from a foundational understanding and how it benefits business and how it benefits your career, and everything is based off data and information. And once you can just
absolutely.
realize that, it becomes less just like large. You can see it in different segments. And
So agree. All that data really is information if you think about it. And I mean, people are creative with language all the time.
hmm
Language exists to convey information. So does data. Data is raw information. So why couldn't we be creative about how we deal with data and communicate data? Never really understood that. And
Yeah.
also, like, the way it is taught, unfortunately, is dry a lot
Yeah.
of times. And
So yeah,
that is like where my passion for the subject comes from, because I would have never just want to like sit in front of a spreadsheet all day like no, but
yeah, going from that, I was looking over your portfolio and you had a fun project segment. And two of the projects that caught my eye were the model to zombie outbreak and
Yeah, yeah.
optimized travel for UC Bearcats
Yeah.
football team. So like, could you just talk over those projects very briefly and just how analytics can be applied to just very different like topics and
Absolutely, yeah. So like I have for context, I have a portfolio where I just try to present research and projects that I've worked on. Those are both projects that I did as not capstone, but final projects for my
Okay.
classes. So it is funny. You can apply. It's so versatile, the tools of data analytics. So I took a class called mathematical modeling, which was actually taught within the math department. Not necessarily statistics heavy,
Mhm.
but you use like structural methods and equations, dynamical systems. You can model something like a zombie outbreak. That's
Yeah.
pretty cool,
Yeah.
honestly. Like you can like interact the equations together, and you
Yeah.
can feel like, okay, like if zombies shoot up, then humans shoot down,
Yeah.
and like the equations play together, and that's really valuable for things like predicting and in economics research. Not to like go into that, because I would dive into that rabbit hole, but not to really dive into that. Like macroeconomists use these types of models all the time to forecast overall economic changes. Maybe in the context of business analytics and data analytics, that model probably wouldn't be very applicable,
Okay.
but the optimization model would be. So for a final project, it was pretty cool. It was 4 of us in it's a 4,000 level BANA class here in the Linder College of Business. It's taught by Dr. Lozano, who's amazing. If you ever get the chance, if you're a UC student listening to this,
Yes.
take Dr. Lozano's class. He's super cool. And what we did is we used the traveling salesman problem, which is a very famous optimization problem, to optimize the path that the UC Bearcats football team could take when they join their new conference, the football
wow.
team. Yeah. So like, okay, but like instead of just traveling all over the place, we want to minimize the travel time and the travel cost spent, and you can develop a model on how to minimize that.
That's
And
so interesting.
yeah, it's pretty cool.
So you're still involved into the football team. You're a
Somewhat.
part
Somewhat.
in
It was
a
just
way.
a final project, yeah. But it was a lot of fun. We got
That's
an
so
A on
cool.
it. So
Nice, nice. So going more into like when you were transitioning out of Neo,
Yeah.
when you're looking for a substitute for president, what qualities, potential, and like vision were you searching for in someone, and how did Nora embody that?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was actually a really, really interesting time, because for the first time I had to think about, I had built an organization, then for the first time I had to think about, it was like, whoa, I'm not gonna be here forever.
Yeah.
Like, I gotta find
You need a
somebody who's gonna maybe take
successor.
that over. Yeah. And it was not a decision that I made by myself. It was back then the vice president was very involved, John Triger. John, if you're listening to this, I love
You're
you.
amazing. Yes.
But it was a bunch of people on exec who just had open conversations about that. I wouldn't say it was necessarily a competition for who will be the next president type of what I was looking for is initiative, is a certain level of entrepreneurial spirit, creativity. Nora hits all of these
Yes.
on the
Nora's-
dime. Nora was there were a lot back in that, like I guess a year ago. on that exec board, there were a lot of talented folks on this exec board, and a lot of them are still in Neo, to my knowledge, right now. But Nora, I thought, was a great fit for the president position just because of the way she thinks about problems. She is she has an incredible entrepreneurial spirit, in my opinion, and is very creative about that. I remember I had asked Nora to complete a little presentation for, I think it was the ARCRC orientation. And then Nora sent me that thing. I was like, am I looking like a professionally produced like newscaster? We're like, whoa, like what is this? Like, I think you know which video I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I looked at that and I was like, this is incredible. And Nora is just somebody who also challenges assumptions, I believe, which is very important. Incredibly well-rounded and mature. And so Nora was a very organic choice, I feel. And I mean, evidence shows.
Yes, we're here now.
The choice was a very good one.
Yes. So with that, where do you envision, I know your hand's not too much with Neo anymore, but the future of Neo on campus in Cincinnati and beyond? Like, where would you like to see it go?
I actually really appreciate that question, because when I was finishing up with my own undergraduate studies, I was kind of thinking like, wow, oh my goodness, it would be so cool to see Neo expand into different campuses. Like back then I was in contact with an organization, with the president and founder of an organization called BTG. And, you know, they're active all over the country and they're doing amazing things.
Go Devin.
Exactly. Yeah, Devin, exactly. And they're doing amazing things. And I was like, well, that'd be pretty cool if Neo could do something similar. But then I was also, now that I'm a little bit further removed and I've graduated, I'm thinking like, part of the quality that Neo has is a strong tie to this specific community. So I would be happy to see Neo go either way. And I think it is up to the president's decision, to the executive leadership's decision to see where they want to lead the organization where they think that it organically needs to go, whether that means expanding into different regions or not. Currently, like just hearing some of the amazing entrepreneurs that Neo is working with, like for example, Means. I got really excited when I heard that Neo is working together with Means because he's incredible. And I've been wanting, when I was president, I was pushing really hard to work together with Means, and to hear like that in my books is a massive success. Making Neo's footprint in the Cincinnati community a little bit more sustainable. That in my eyes is success. And I don't have like a specific vision that I want to stamp on this organization, because yes, I'm the founder, but I'm currently not leading the organization. The folks who are in charge of it should have the freedom to do that. And that is what I think makes an organization like that beautiful, that it's dynamic and not like bound to some like, but in like 5 years it's going to be some old person. like what do I still have to say in that organization? You know, like I will always be happy to be a resource for the organization any way I can, but any way that the executive leadership thinks the organization should go, I'd be happy to support that in any way I can.
Yes. And I've also always enjoyed being a part of Neo. I think the brand of Neo has maintained what it was at its foundation. I think that's something that's so special, especially on campus with the business owners. Like everyone is so willing and able to help, and it's continually growing, as you said, with different people in charge and in like the executive roles. Shout out to everybody in Neo. We're doing great work. You all are doing great work, and I'm talking about it. But
love you.
So the next question I do have, so knowing you did graduate last semester in the spring, how's it been working as a full-time, I know you were just an analyst and you're starting a new role in January, since a lot of listeners are in their last few years of their degree, I am, which is kind of scary.
It is scary.
And going the full-time route, like no matter their area of focus, like what are some of the biggest differences between like internship work and maybe like on-campus work compared to a full-time role?
Incredibly relevant. For me, it was a little bit of a shock because I always loved being in an environment like this. Like, you know, you walk into this building, you have an academic spirit, you have curiosity, you have entrepreneurial spirit, all bundled together, and you see all your friends all the time, all day, every day. And that's just not the same in a full-time job. I'm not saying it couldn't be like that. But for me, it was quite the transition. And then since I also moved into an area where I don't really know anyone at all, it was quite the transition for me. I would say if I had to give maybe one piece of advice is don't stress about it. And then also don't really the biggest piece of advice I would have. A lot of people in undergrad stress about the prestige of their job or like, oh, I have to get like, for example, and there's nothing wrong with consulting, but a lot of people feel like they have to get in with one of the 3 big consulting firms or in accounting. I know it's like the big 4. People are really stressing to get in one of those. Once you actually graduate and you start working in those jobs, people don't necessarily care as much because this environment on the undergraduate level is also competitive. That changes a little bit. Really go for what you want to do, and don't stress as much. It's easier said than done, but don't stress as much about the prestige of what your job is going to do. If you want to do nonprofit work, do nonprofit work. You have your entire life to figure out whether you actually like it or not. You're not going to be stuck in the same job that you get right after college until the rest of your life. Be honest with yourself, but also be aware that a decision you make after college is not going to be the final one. Things are going to be okay.
Yeah. And I think we had our first initial conversation at the Rose Street Cafe. And that was something that, because I think I was in my sophomore year, and I was like kind of saying, like, you need to get to the best companies, the top dogs.
Yeah.
And you're just like, just figure out what you're passionate about.
Yeah.
And everything else will fall in line, and you'll
Absolutely.
be so much more happy and fulfilled in what you're doing.
You'll be aligned with what you want to do.
Yeah, and
yes.
it's like also ensuring like you have your rest and you're at your leisure in balance with like the work that you're doing. So thank you for that. I've been figuring, it's an ongoing process that you figure out, but
absolutely,
I feel like I've gotten much better at that. So
I feel like people also don't stop with that process. People that say they have everything figured out probably lying.
Life's an ongoing circle.
It is.
So talking about just like getting involved on campus, what do you see as the value of getting involved in like on campus groups that align with your passion and goals for those who are still in college?
In a way, you can think of college as this concentrated space of minds who are curious, who want to do things in life, who all have different backgrounds and interests, and it's a very special place to be in young years as you're still developing and figuring things out. It can be, on the one hand, if you overload yourself incredibly, it can pull you down. It can lead to burnout, but it can also be very, very empowering if you find a community that you want to be a part of, and a community that you feel like you want to improve and you want to build upon. Biggest value, I would say, is that you can find like-minded folks who share a passion, and then also learn from other people's stories and narratives. One of the coolest things for me of getting involved in campus is doing a bunch of completely different things. For example, we're here because of Neo, but I was also really, really active in the Mountaineering Club, which is a completely different community of folks. And I was also, for example, really active in an organization called UC Four Paws, which is Service Dogs in Training. If you go to UC,
cute.
If you go to UC, you probably know them, the little cute puppies with the red vests on. And that's just kind of like shades of interest that I have. And I was involved in organizations that I ended up dropping because I lost interest in that certain area. And so that's like, it's almost like a dry run, trial and error, and there's nothing you can lose. And then when you enter the real world, not saying it's impossible, but it's going to get a lot more difficult to try out different things, just because you're not in the space anymore with a lot of like-minded folks your same age and all of that. Yeah,
and I think it's something, especially when you're in high school, people are like, oh, cherish your years in college because you'll never get it back and never be in the same environment. And I don't think I started realizing that until later, junior year, senior year, oh, you're never going to, like you said, be in a place where you can put your hand into so many different buckets, see if you like it, see if you don't, meet so many people from around the world, around the country, different backgrounds and perspectives. So I love it here. I wish I never
No, I know, but also the thing is, a lot of people think life ends at 22, 23 when you graduate. And that is also not true, because I just had a corporate job for half a year, and now I'm getting back into the academic world on a research fellowship. So I get to experience something completely different, but something that I've been really looking forward to for a long time. So don't see that as an end. There's many more opportunities, and if you feel like you're stuck, just live in a different country for a little bit. The world is vast.
So talking about your research, what
I'm ready.
created and like brought that passion, especially in the environmental space, for you in research?
Yeah. It's a lot of times when I talk about what I've done, people are like, "Whoa, you're like a little bit all over the place, right?" Like Neo has nothing to do with environmental space at all. I think I'm going to answer this question in two parts. First of all, why research? Why research is I was involved with Neo, and I learned a lot during my time at Neo. I learned about problems that I would have never known about if it wasn't for some of the vulnerable moments that I shared with some of Neo's clients. And that was a realization of like, there is something seriously wrong with this country. This is a systemic issue. And I believe that systemic problems necessitate systemic solutions. And in my eyes, that's policy research. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. No, but in my eyes, that's policy research. It's researching what policy levers can be pulled to eradicate these inequities forever. And that is why I want to be a researcher. That's why I want to be an economic policy researcher. My interest in the environment has actually, I would say, long before Neo. I've been interested in sustainability and the environment, and it's always been there. And then sort of in a way, I realized that there is this intersection between the economic policy research space, but then also climate change, climate risks, pollution is very intersectional with inequities. And a lot of times, low to middle income communities are the one that are most at risk from climate risks. A great example is right now, one thing I'm looking into is heat waves. Heat waves don't impact everyone the same way. For example, if you are a household that can't afford to effectively cool down your apartment or your house in the summer, then you're more likely to suffer from health consequences from heat waves. Climate change is riddled with, or correlates with, a vast set of inequities. And so for me, the environment/economic policy research space is sort of this unexplored niche that I want to find policy solutions for. And that's why I want to be an environmental economist, really.
Yeah, I'm like lost for words because I was learning as you spoke with that, and just being involved with the Center for Entrepreneurship here. We have our Net Impact initiative that we're doing. We're working on doing an inclusion times sustainability event with Brandon A. Reynolds. We started a company called Be the Keeper. It's like all around like sustainability and environmental consulting. And we talked over the topic of like environmental racism. I think that's what you're kind of hitting on. So could you explain like what environmental racism means and like looks like to you, and then we'll get into like the wrapping up stages.
Yeah. I mean, just to preface this, I have never experienced environmental racism. I know this from a theoretical standpoint, and I believe it's important to stress that this is coming from more of a textbook definition rather than testimony. This is valuable, I think, to make sure I say that in the beginning. But from a textbook definition, environmental racism is, let's take, for example, pollution. A lot of times, low to middle income communities, it's more likely that they're exposed to hazardous chemicals, and I have done research, for example, on plastic waste. They're more likely to suffer from health consequences, like especially also communities of color, black communities in the South, for example, hazardous paper mills and all of that. I would say environmental racism is a subcategory of racism that has resulted from a system of inequities, but also sort of exerts itself when it comes to climate change and the environment. In a way, it's a complex space to understand because it's hard to just say like, every community like suffers this much from consequences of climate change. But in a way, it's a shade. It's a subcategory of a broader problem.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it just all goes into that ongoing circle of understanding like the barriers that minority businesses face, but then there's those underlying layers that increase the severity of it, but people might not understand
Yeah.
or know how it's impacting that.
Yeah.
And just it goes back to just like the foundation of Neo is education.
Yeah.
It's just really you need education to understand
Yes.
what's impacting you and how. I forget what you said. Systematic problems need systematic solutions.
Yes.
And I think
Yes.
people don't look. They look at systematic problems. It's like I don't think there's a solution for that. But I loved how
Yeah.
you put it. Like there's a solution
Yeah.
for everything
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
that, and it seems like everything's correlated in one way or another.
One of my favorite quotes is education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world.
Mhm.
Nelson Mandela. I love that quote because it sums that up exactly. And that's my freshman year of college, I wrote an opinion piece at UC Blue Ash that tackles this issue exactly of like, in a way, inequities in education are so wicked because not only is it an inequity, it is an inequity that robs people of the very potential to change something about it from the very moment that they could. It's this vicious cycle, and that's what makes me so mad about it. Like, it is so wicked if you think about it, that education is such a important equalizer. It should be,
Yeah.
but then it can be abused in so many different ways, and that just makes me furious.
Yeah, but that's what we're working towards. But I know we've been here. I could sit here all day, which probably
No, this is
wouldn't
fun.
be the best
I love
for
it.
the distribution of the podcast. But Daniel, we talked over so many things from like the origin story of Neo, how business analytics is vital to business's success, and everything in between. So I want to thank you for taking the time to hang out with us on In the Know with
Thank
Neo.
you.
Yeah, sharing your passions and your perspectives. And I can personally say you've inspired like the careers of many students and professionals, especially my own on UC and beyond. So we'll continue to let that legacy live through Neo. And the last question I do have for you is if you could give advice to freshman year Daniel, what would it be?
Ooh. That's a good question. I'd say, okay, freshman year Daniel was a very frustrated Daniel. But I would say, if I could give one piece of advice to me 5 years ago, damn, I'm old. If I could give myself a piece of advice from 5 years ago, I would say, don't stress too much about it. Just try your very best every day. That's all you can do. You're gonna fail. You're gonna fall. You're gonna get rejected all the time. But at the end of the day, you know, I have a statistician's mind, so if you keep trying and you keep trying, you're bound to be successful. That's just that's where it's going to converge to, you know. It's going to your attempts are going to converge to success eventually. And if you just keep trying, if your internal motivation is in the right place, if your heart is in the right place, if you're doing what you're doing for the right reasons to help people, you're going to be successful.
It'll work out.
It will work out one way or the other.
Perfect. Well, I think that perfectly sums up from the start to the beginning. But so thank you so much, Daniel. And that was In the Know with Neo. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If you're interested in learning more about Neo's mission and vision, follow us on social media at Neo Initiative or visit our website at neocincy.com.